I'm Steve Sapato, and you're listening to The Happiness Agenda. It's great to have you here with us today, and I want you to know that on Happiness Agenda, we talk about happiness. Go figure that one out. But it's also sometimes we talk about how to help you get there, how to find your own happiness. We tell you how we found happiness, and then shut up. We don't care about the rest because that's what we're going to talk about today is happiness. And I've got absolutely the wonderful Monique Rhodes, who is the happiness strategist with me today. And here she comes. Are you there, Monique?
I am here, Steve. So nice to be with you.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Hey, do you have an accent?
I do. Can you guess where it's from?
Uh, New England.
New Zealand
That's a little farther away than New England.
is a little bit further away than
Yeah,
New
further away.
England.
Do you live there now?
I'm here at the moment. I'm going to be leaving shortly, but I came home because there was no COVID here for the last 2 years. So I got to take a
Oh,
step back in time and live in a COVID-free environment. It's been
that's cool.
extraordinary here. So yeah, I'm
Yeah.
getting myself ready to head back to that end of the world.
Where's back there? Where do you live normally?
I usually live in Los Angeles, but actually I'm moving to Mexico.
Oh, good. I was like, we'll forgive you for that. But okay, moving to Mexico, not New Mexico, to
No,
Mexico.
to Mexico.
Well, that's cool. You got a place on the beach, or are you just gonna
Be
hustle up
near the
next to a
beach.
mountain?
Little place called Merida.
Merida. I can't imagine repeating that, especially if I've had too much to drink. Where do you live? Merida. Yeah. But yeah, so that's cool. So tell us a little bit about you and how you got into being a happiness strategist.
Yeah, sure. So for me, Steve, it was a case of really my own experience. And, I grew up in this beautiful country of New Zealand. It's so amazing, so gorgeous. And with all wonderful things, though, many of you will know New Zealand from the Lord of the Rings. The greatest sporting team in the world is the All Blacks. The Power of the Dog actually was filmed here, which is about to probably clean up at the Academy Awards,
I
was
I
filmed.
I, I know New Zealand from a couple shows that I watch on Acorn, which
Right.
is like 800 words. Those are my favorite kind of New Zealand shows.
Right, right. Okay, great. I don't know that one, but yeah, it's a popular little country. But as with anything, Steve, there's always a light and shadow to everything. And we have problems here, unfortunately, with child abuse. And I was one of those statistics. So I grew up in a difficult situation and I really ended up struggling with my emotions. My emotions were all over the place. And I think when I look back now in reality, probably by the time I hit my teenage years, I was probably quite severely depressed. And then by the age of 19, things sort of came to a head. I couldn't get my emotions under control. I was struggling with my life and I ended up in hospital having attempted to take my own life. And I really asked myself the question when I was sitting there of why is it that some people seem to be happy and other people seem to struggle? And why was it that I was one of the people that struggled? And was it possible that, it was just something in my makeup and my genetic makeup? I just didn't know. So I decided to give myself 2 years. I went on a mission and I was like, I want to see if I can turn this around. And 2 years turned into over 20 years of traveling all over the world, studying different philosophies under different teachers, seeing whether I could figure out was it possible to turn my life around. And I did. I completely transformed everything to the point where I often say now, if I wasn't me, I would be jealous of myself. And I just have this amazing, extraordinary life, not through luck, but through design. And now this is what I teach. I teach people everything that I learned to transform my life. And it's all about how to be happier. And we have extraordinary results with what I do. And I've students all over the world. One of my programs, the 10-Minute Mind, is in 70 universities and colleges around the world, including New York City has one of my programs in all of their colleges and universities there. So it's powerful work and it's possible to shift and change. And I just really encourage people to take the steps to do it.
So here's question one and all that. you decided you would go out and find out how to make yourself happier, and you traveled the world. How did you afford to do that?
Mm. So it wasn't I didn't go to make myself happier. I wanted to go and see whether it was even possible. That was my first question. How did I afford to do it, Steve? I was a musician. So I was performing all over the world and I would perform, create enough money to keep myself going for a few months and then go back, do another gig, do another 2 gigs, however many I needed to do. And then, that's how I lived out of a bag traveling the world for 13 years. So that was
Oh,
a
wow.
13 years of it was living like that. It
What'd
was
you play?
incredible. A singer-songwriter.
Oh, all right. So you
Mm,
sang.
mm.
Yeah, that's nice. My son, the reason I really relate to that well, my son's a bartender, and he's now I'll say world renowned. He's won several contests, that kind of stuff. But he was, he said, I want to be able to travel. I want to be able to do what I want. And so when he was up at the university, and I'd encouraged him to do, whatever makes you happy. And he looked at me one day after 4 years at the university and said, "Well, would you be mad if I didn't go into a profession?" I said, "Why would I be mad? What do you want to do?" And he said, "I want to be a bartender." And he'd been a bartender for me at one of my pubs and a couple other things along the way. And I went, "Well, hey, if that makes you happy, go ahead." Not dreaming that it would take him around the world. So he's right now in Glasgow, Scotland, he and his
Right.
wife. And but yeah, that's
Nice.
what he goes and he can any place they always need an extra bartender, they pick him up and he's happy to be there. And of course, sometimes he gets invited as a celebrity bartender. So it's amazing what we if we decide to follow ourselves, what can happen to us, right?
Yeah. If we follow ourselves, I think that's would be an interesting question as to what each person interprets. What does following myself actually mean?
Yeah, and I appreciate the fact that for some people, especially someone like yourself who had suffered through abuse, suffered through that kind of stuff, when you're actually in search of who you are, there's one thing that you have to do. You have to figure out what who am I? What makes me happy? What am I going to develop into? And it's a quest for a lot of people. And I think that's why when you talk about being on the happiness agenda, that's one of the things that a lot of people struggle with. That's the reason I started this whole thing was people go, well, how did they get there? They wake up rich and famous one day? And I started off with, and I'll say Cheryl Teagues. It wasn't Cheryl Teagues, but it was a supermodel. Was like on my first two or three podcasts, and it was what they suffered through in order to get to this place where they could finally have enough money that they went, I'm never doing modeling again. Right? It was a horrible profession. It was a horrible way to make a living. And I was like, you're like, wow, think of that. We're all thinking, boy, they're living this magical life of being a model. And then she talked about how it was, and there was abuse in it and there was criticism and of course there was self-deprivation, because you had to be this thin in order to do that kind of there was all kinds of stuff to it. And that's what when I look at people, we all want to know, how did somebody get there? Did they just wake up one day and they were rich and famous and happy? And the answer is almost always no, right? So
Absolutely, and I don't think that rich and famous goes together with happy either. So I think that that's one of the biggest fallacies that we live with is that we think that rich and famous, wealthy, powerful will equate to happiness because that's what we're consistently led to believe is the formula for it. So I would, yeah, go happy.
well, we talk about that. I grew up in Davenport, Iowa, Moline, Illinois, home of John Deere, right? John Deere tractors, John Deere country for farming, and that was one of the things we always talked about. That I said one of the things I had to do was I finally had to move out of there. My son said the same thing. That's what when we decided to go together. But it was we weren't happy in Moline, Illinois. There wasn't enough going on, but most of the people in that area, they were. We always said that you can't start something new in Moline, Illinois, because the people are like, why are you doing that? Right? We're happy where we're at. And they were, whether it was getting up and going to work. And then when they got off work, they either went fishing, or they went to the pub and had a beer, or they just sat and watched TV, but they were happy. And that's all that counts in your real life. So if you're happy, super duper. But if you're not happy, then you have to figure out what will make you happier. What can you do to be happier? And that is a real quest for a lot of us. I think of when I think of quest, I always think of the hobbits and stuff. And theirs was more of an adventure. But that's what I preach is every day should be an adventure. what is your adventure today? What is your adventure tonight? What will you be doing that will make your life adventuresome, adventurous? And that for me makes happiness for me is there's always something new around the corner. So what's your advice then when people say, well, easy for you, Monique, you went out and traveled the world for 13 years and you found happy. What do I do?
Well, I think the most important thing is to understand where happiness actually comes from. And I don't think that many people do understand that. I think that most people believe that happiness comes from those things that we're led to believe as a culture will make us happy: money, fame, power, nice car, nice house, beautiful partner. And they don't. And we're shown this consistently by people who have all these things and don't actually end up, uh, experiencing the happiness that they expect with it. So we have to then look and see, well, where does happiness actually come from? And from the work that I did, studying for all these years, what I discovered was that actually we're consistently looking outside of ourselves for happiness. But happiness and suffering, actually, the deciding factor is how our mind is. It's not actually the external circumstances. The decider of our happiness and suffering is actually our mind. And the most important thing that we can do is work with our mind. If we work with our mind, if we learn to tame and train this out of control mind that most of us are living with, we have a chance of mastering our own happiness. Because happiness can seem pretty elusive for a lot of us, particularly in a world where there's a lot of overwhelm, anxiety, there's a lot of things happening that externally are very difficult. It is completely possible to live a well and happy life despite what is happening in the world if you stop putting your focus on the external circumstances and start to bring your focus internally.
That's really true. I go back to in 2007, 2008, when the United States economy, with all the real estate stuff, went right in the tank, and people lost their houses and people lost their investment properties. But again, I'm in Moline, Illinois, right? There wasn't much going on there, top or bottom, so we were kind of insulated from all this. But I ran a bar then. I owned a nightclub there, and people would come in and be going, "Oh man, isn't this miserable? Isn't this economy just terrible?" And I'd look at them and I go, "Wait, Bob, don't you work at wherever he worked?" And he'd go, "Well, yeah." I go, "You still work there?" And he'd go, "Well, yeah." I go, "Well, did you get demoted?" "No." Did they cut your wages?" "No." "Well, Bob, what are you unhappy about?" you know, I mean, it was like the external stuff that these people would come in with every night, every night, and say, "Man, this economy is just killer. It's just horrible." And I would go, "But it hasn't affected us almost at all, because everything for them was exactly the same. But they were looking outside. They were listening to the news." That's one thing I always don't listen to the news. The news is meant to depress you. It's meant to make you fearful, and that's one of the challenges. But you said something earlier too, that it's in our mind, and we have to learn. I was working with Zig Ziglar, oh, geez, 35 years ago, when he had a wonderful little test, and he put it out to his audience every time he spoke. Um, and it was like a list, like 70 things. And he said, "Are these uh, habits or skills or something?" I forget how he referred to them, but are they, you were born with these, or did you learn these? And some of them were like happiness, love, affection, temperament, those kind of things. And when everybody got done marking these things on their pad, then he would say, "Just so you know, everybody done? All of these are learned, every single one of them. You learn how to love, you learn to be loved, you learn to give love. And if you had the wrong teacher, then you discovered abuse, right?" So it's, where do you learn this stuff, and then how do you program yourself? And you've got a thing, you said, the 10-minute mind. So obviously you've got a good handle on, what do I need to do to make myself happier, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important to understand. I mean, I love Zig Ziglar. I think it's important to understand it's not only learned, it's habitual behavior. What are you doing habitually? And most of us are living our lives with no real understanding of how much of our life is a series of habits. We might think habits are obvious, like cleaning my teeth or taking a shower, but habits are much more subtle than that. It's how do I respond to circumstances? How do I respond to certain people? How do I respond to events that happen? How do I respond when my partner says something I don't like? So we're made up literally of a series of habits that we're living with unconsciously. And if we can shift our habits, if we can learn better habits, and if we can learn to become conscious and aware of the habits that we already have, by shifting a series of habits, we're actually able to transform our lives. We're actually able to turn our lives around. And I also have a program called the Happiness Baseline, which is an 8-week online course that teaches you how to be happier. And we test people with the most prestigious happiness test at the beginning and at the end. And we have found that we have a 100% success rate in shifting people's happiness levels. And
And
the
that's called
reason
the
that we do it,
happiness
the happiness
baseline.
baseline. Yeah. And you
Okay.
can find it on my website, which is moniquerhodes.com. And it's
Okay.
really
Wait.
powerful.
You just blow that off. When we're talking about helping a whole ton of people,
Oh,
right? You
sure.
say
Well, if
Monique
you see,
Rhodes,
yes, if you see my
MONI.
name, yeah, it's
Well,
on the screen there.
but podcast people will
Moniquerhodes.com.
only hear it, right?
Right.
Remember? Oh,
No
yeah.
problem. Monique,
Monique, MON.
MoniqueRhodes.com. That's it.
Cool. Yeah.
And if you come there, you click on courses, you find all the information there about it. But it's really powerful, and it's working with different aspects of your life to enable you to actually shift your happiness levels by working with the habits that you normally would do consciously or unconsciously. Let's shift them. Let's bring in some other habits and see what happens. And this course is completely transformative.
And that's I think what's phenomenal on this is that when she says 100% success rate, that you'll be happier than when you started the course. How many
Yes.
people would love to be happier than I do that when I do my workshops? A lot of times I'll say, who wants to be happier, healthier, have better relationships, make more money, and live longer? And people raise their hand all the time. There isn't always a way to get there with some of these people. I did that for a group of managers at a company I was hired in to speak for, and I said, and they said, here's a specific thing: these managers have bad attitudes. Basically, what they said. So my job. So at one point in time, I said, who would like to be happier, healthier, and have better relationships, would make more money? And all 30 of the hands went up. They were like, yeah, we're into this. I went, great. Who's willing to do one thing to make that happen? And nobody raised their hand. And I went, okay, I must have asked that wrong, right? In your head, you're spinning all these things. And I went back and repeated it. And all the hands went up. I went, okay, so who's willing to do just one thing to make that happen? And they all just sat and looked at me. Not one of them was willing to do one thing to make a change in their life. And that's important here. Monique has just said, I have a course that's 8 weeks long. Is that what you said? 8 weeks?
It's an 8-week course. Yes.
8 weeks long that will help you be happier than you are right now. How many people would like to be happier than they are right now? I think you all raised your hands a minute ago. How many should take Monique's course? You should raise your hand. And then you should just go to Monique Rhodes right now. Get off the podcast and go find a way to be happier. That's what I think. But for those of you who are willing to stay around, Monique, what else you got for us?
Well, the great thing about that course as well, Steve, is that I don't charge for it. What I do is I get people to put an accountability bond down. So they put an accountability bond down, and as long as they complete the course within 10 weeks, it's an 8-week course. We give you 2 weeks leeway. As long as you complete it, you can then just drop us an email and say, I've completed the course. We check. I want my accountability bond back. No questions asked. We give it back. The reason that I do it this way is because what we've discovered is that only 3% of people complete an online course. So we have a 92% completion rate with this course. All I want is for people to be happier. I don't want people to start this course and not complete it. I'm in there every day helping you, answering any questions that you might have, because it's that important to me that you learn these skills. I feel that it's a fundamental right for each of us to be able to understand, how can I be happier? What is it that I need to do to be happier? And it's not as hard to shift your happiness levels as you might think.
That's phenomenal thought process. I've got another friend, and I just drew a blank on her name, but she says, hey, and she offers monthly webinars. And she says, it's $97 to take my webinar. $97 to take and it's like a 5-hour or 5.5-hour webinar. And she said, that's if you want to learn this. And she says, and if you finish with this, if you're there from the time I start, and she's the only one who teaches it. So, I mean, it's not like she has 5 or 6 other people in. So she knows who's with her for all 5.5 hours. And when she's done, Jane says, okay, then everybody who finished this course will get their money back. Like you said, it's an accountability bond, but she doesn't call it that. She calls it, hey, you got to put your money in. You got to put some skin in the game, as she calls it. And
Yeah.
when they have skin in the game, they agree to stay all the way there to the end. It's only $100. I say only $100, a lot of money. And so, but still, it's $97 if you stay the whole time. And then look at all the knowledge you gain. Same here. Oh my goodness, this is a free course if you finish it. All you got to do is want to be happy.
That's it.
That's pretty cool.
Who wouldn't want to?
Yeah, I'm going to have to sign up for that. And I'm a pretty happy guy. Well, sometimes I'm just sleepy. I'm just sleepy.
I mean, everything that I teach is everything that I practice myself on a daily basis. So it's even when you get to a place where you're really happy, you have to maintain it, particularly at the moment, where we've just faced this, pandemic. But I think that the mental health pandemic that we're facing right now is just so huge. And I think that more than ever, we need to be taking care of each other and taking care of our minds. They're the two things that I really encourage people to do. Take care of your mind, take care of each other. Because at the moment, so many people are really struggling. And I think it's only going to get worse as more and more people struggle. We'll live in a culture more and more where people are struggling. So you have to go against the grain. You have to do things differently from other people if you don't want to end up in the same kind of place that everybody else is in.
Well, that's powerful. You see, and if you go to Facebook, at least half of everything people post is negative, at least half. If you go to other places, I mean, I was just looking at somebody who just posted something on LinkedIn, and they were talking about themselves and how they were struggling and how some people reached out and said, this is not a place for that kind of stuff. That's for Facebook. And, that's like, wait, who made you king of the day, right? How do you get to say what that person can put on their LinkedIn? Because it was still business related, because it talked about how she struggled to do this and how she was overcoming it. And that helped her better in her business, right? That kind of stuff. And yet so many people want to judge other people. And I think that's fascinating, especially today, isn't it? When everybody should be giving in, we should be looking for more happiness. We know everybody's been shut in. We know everybody's been cooped up. Yeah, we got differences, but the differences a lot of times is what creates conversation, and conversation should create wonderful emotions, even if you disagree, right?
Absolutely.
So that's the type of thing that when we struggle with that, way back when I was, I didn't do debate in high school, but when I got to college, somebody invited me to come do be a judge on a debate thing. And I was like, I don't know anything about debate. They went, just come, Steve, I'll show you what you need to know. And that's when I learned that all this time, these people, young kids, they'd been taking a side and debating that side. This is why this side should win. And then a month later, they had to debate the other side. And they had to debate why that side should win. And boy, I'll tell you what, you talk about kids with open minds, because they knew that both sides had advantages and both sides had disadvantages. And that's what most of us really lack, isn't it?
What's that? Say that again. Most people lack what? Advantages?
We lack understanding how each side can be right and each side can be wrong.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, if human rights are being violated, if if people are being hurt, it's vital that we stand up against what is happening for people. And I see a lot of this in the United States, where there's a lot of human rights that are really violated there that I find quite disturbing. At the same time, it's really important for us to have friends who have different beliefs, different religious beliefs, spiritual beliefs, political beliefs. Otherwise, we're just living in a bubble of our own making. And unfortunately, social media is keeping us in these bubbles. And if we don't have the ability to see a different side of a story, then our empathy levels start to diminish. And we're living in a time where we need a lot more empathy. We need to take care of each other. We're one whole world now. We're not separate countries. We're a community as a human race, and we're in crisis. Not only with wars and viruses, we're in a climate change crisis right now. That if we don't learn how to communicate with each other and take care of each other at this time, we're going to be in for some very, very dark times as this unfolds. So it's important that there's dialogue. It's important that if you're a Republican, you have friends who are Democrats and you talk to them, try and understand what is it? Why do you see things this way? Like, tell me, I want to understand. And if you're a Democrat, and I'm only using America as an example because it's the most polarized right now. If you're a Democrat, have friends who are Republicans. Sit down and talk to them. Try and understand and have conversations. Of course, there are lots of things on both sides that are problematic, and we can't be black and white with it. But again, I say, if you're following a particular political party that outright hurts one group of people, then you might want to ask yourself some pretty serious questions. At the same time, yeah, like, have those as conversations. You might find that the person that you're talking to is not really thought about how different laws actually affect members of their family, or what if they were in that situation. How would it affect them? Maybe as a white man, you don't understand things the same way as a Hispanic woman would. So it's really important to talk to each other and have dialogue where you can actually listen. And learning active listening skills is one of the most powerful things that you can do to enable yourself, to do it. Some years ago, when I was in the United States, I'm going to be honest and say the whole Donald Trump thing just was so far beyond what I could get my head around. So what did I do? I flew to Minneapolis and went to a Trump rally so that I could see it firsthand, so I could experience it, so I could talk to the people there and try and get a perspective outside of my own to understand what was happening. And I know that was pretty extreme. Don't get me wrong; it was dangerous. It was scary. There was riots afterwards. But I'm really also happy that I did that. And are there ways that you can do things like that, no matter what you believe in? You know, on a smaller level, how is it that you can put yourself in someone else's shoes and really try and understand where they're coming from? That's the kind of experience that we need at the moment so that we can be more loving to each other. Because that's all it's about. All the wars and all the ways that we end up, in trouble with each other is just a lack of being able to love each other. So we have to look inside our own hearts and ask ourselves, where is the war in me? Where is it? I might not be invading Ukraine right now, but how is it that I end up in the world, angry or frightened or, criticizing other people? Because if we think that one person can't make a difference, we really have to look at the situation that's happening right now and see that one person is actually holding the whole world hostage right now. So one person can make a difference. And in your circle of influence, you can make a difference. How can you make a difference? By looking at what are all the ways that you end up behaving in a similar way on a smaller level, with anger, with disdain, with contempt, with talking behind other people's backs. Maybe you're dishonest. It doesn't make you a bad person, but these are things that it's really worthwhile looking at in yourself right now as you look at the really difficult situation we're in, where someone's need for power is completely out of control.
It's when you said several things along the way there, but I go back because I'm old. I used to ask all the time, what's the difference between a Democrat and a Republican? And when you ask the Democrats, they would say this, and when you ask the Republicans, they would say that. And every time, if they weren't next to each other, like if I asked one 5 minutes here and then ran into one over here and asked that one, they were almost identical in what they shared, what they didn't like, what they stood for. I mean, obviously there was some base, like one always said, well, the Democrats love big government and the Republicans hate big government. I don't know which, I don't know which is true or not true about that way, but it was like, this is what they were told when they were young, and this is what's true today. Because, and I would say, well, but so and so, right, who is on this side, he voted this way, and they go, well, they're an idiot, right? And so on this side, they voted the other way. Well, they're an idiot, right? But what I tried to point out was, these people weren't just black and white like the Democrats and Republicans are black and white. I'm a Democrat and I'm a Republican. But when it got to what they really wanted, if you got to vote, you would vote on the side of the Republicans or you would vote on the side of the Democrats, because those particular issues were coming together issues. And it's funny to me that if we go back to, and I don't, I'm not an expert in any of this, but let's say the Ronald Reagan and Dwight D. Eisenhower and those kind of people days, the Republicans and the Democrats actually walked with each other, talked with each other. They, went to lunch and dinners with each other. And now you can't get the two together. They've decided to create this animosity between the two parties, which of course drives the animosity in the people. Because when you ask people today, especially, they don't know what their party is supposed to stand for. They only know that they're supposed to be one or the other. And I find that fascinating. When you said Donald Trump was the first non-politician to get elected to our presidency. Non-politician. He didn't have a side before. Somebody told him he couldn't run. And of course, as stubborn as he was, he said, oh, I can run, I can win. And so he joined the Republican Party because they at least were giving him a shot. And of course, he won. But he was the only non-political person in that whole deal. And you were like, so how did he work out? Obviously, well, once the Democrats got a Republican in there, they hate the Republican regardless of who he is. So it's astounding to me how we perpetuate hate and animosity at so many levels here in America. And I'm hoping that other countries don't do that.
Yeah, it's true. Like and at the end of the day, the reality is that we all just want to be happy, no matter what side we're on. And it's really important for us to look and see, okay, if I want to be happy, am I living within my values? Am I living within my values? I know that in the United States, you have a lot of people who are Christian. You have to ask yourself that question. As I follow a particular way of trying to find happiness for myself and my country, am I living within my values? And I think that's a really important question that I think there's a lot of people deeply out of alignment with their values in the United States who follow someone, like Donald Trump, who's an extremely unchristian man, who, has so many things that he, is against, that is just so, I think if Jesus Christ came down, he would be horrified by the way that so many of us treat each other.
Well, and
So
and I think
far
that's true.
against what he
Yeah, I think
says.
that's true. No matter I mean, see, I'm a Donald Trump fan.
Yeah, I know that. I already know that.
So it's one of those deals where I appreciate that you feel that way, right? But
Yeah.
then I look at how the other side treated him, and again, that gets back to, so who's got all the animosity? It's like when I was growing up, and somebody told me that the Irish were fighting each other. I went, what do you mean the Irish are fighting each other? They said, well, Protestants are blowing up the Catholics, Catholics are blowing up the Protestants. I went, why? And they went, well, because they hate each other. I went, why? And they said, well, because they're different religions. And I went, no, they have the same God, don't they? I mean, isn't that what it's, and so that's the kind of thing that I go, that makes no sense to me. We're so close, but we're so divided. And that's
Mm.
true on almost every level of our lives, that people are like, no, this. And you're like, wait, can it be both ways? No, it can't. Well, you sure can. Of course it can. That's what
But this is
we
where
just got
we've
to find.
moved so far away from
Oh yeah.
actually, it's my happiness at the price of everybody else. And I think that's what's really important for us to understand, is that we're interconnected. It can't be my happiness at the price of yours. I can't hold power and keep you where I want you to be at the price of, and to be happy at the price of you. We're one human race. We have to understand, as I believe that Jesus Christ understood so deeply, that we have to take care of the most vulnerable in our community. We have to take care of everybody. Everybody's equal. It's only our luck where we were born. It's only our luck where we grew up. It's only our luck, the circumstances that we were born into. So it's vital, if we're really looking from a Christian perspective, that we look at our world from that perspective of, if I want to be happy, I need to bring you with me. I can't have my happiness at the cost of you. And I think that's a really important thing for us all to look at. Because when we look at the whole question of happiness, one of the biggest things that I see, that when I see people who are suffering from depression a lot, is really a deep disconnection. And that disconnection is from others, and that disconnection is from themselves. So it's important for us to also understand that our happiness relies on ourselves having relationships with other people, with all sorts of other people. It's really vital for us to have that. So again, for us to see that interconnection is a vital piece of us being happier. And to be isolated and just to have friends with the similar mindset and a mind view is really not healthy for us.
So I'm going to try and bring it back in here because we got about 4 minutes left on this, Monique. First of all, I want you guys to understand that I don't hate Monique, and Monique doesn't hate me. She hates
Not in the
Trump.
slightest.
I like Trump, right?
I don't
Doesn't
even hate
mean
Donald Trump. Let's be clear.
okay,
I do not hate Donald Trump
okay, but
at
she doesn't
all.
like
I
Donald
don't
Trump,
feel
and
that
I
from
like
it.
Trump. But it's we don't have to dislike each other. We can agree to disagree.
Totally.
Oh no, how can that be? How can I still like Monique when she doesn't like somebody that I like? That's what's crazy about this. And that's why you should go to her website, which is MoniqueRhodes.com, and take her happiness, what's it called? Baseline course, right?
Yes.
The happiness baseline course. Because who doesn't want to be happier? We're sitting here debating and talking and having a good old time. We're having a good time. And that's what's important is you can disagree, you can have a good time. My second wife was full Greek, and one of her uncles and I would get into these huge debates, and I forget whether they were baseball, football, I don't know what they were, but we'd be arguing with each other like crazy in a living room and raise our voices to each other. And at one point in time, somebody came in and said, "Okay, stop it, you two. We don't need any fights breaking out here." And Bill and I looked at each other and went, "What do you mean? Who's going to be fighting?" And they went, "Well, you two." And we're like, "Oh no, we were just having a good time yelling at each other, having a good time." And people don't understand that you can do that kind of stuff and still be friends. And that's what we have to start finding out. So you need to go to MoniqueRhodes.com and take the Happiness Baseline 8-week course, which could be free if you'll just finish the course, right, Monique?
That's it. Would love to see you in there.
That'll be cool. I'll look forward to going there. Okay, we got to wrap this up. This has been absolutely phenomenal. I had Monique Rhodes from New Zealand at this point in time. And
Yes.
obviously, she's the happiness expert here who I want you guys to get to know much better. MoniqueRhodes.com. Please go and look at her website and see what you can find about your own happiness. Any last words, Monique?
Just really, I just want to encourage people to understand that you can be in charge of your own happiness. And I want you to have that.
Cool. All right. With that, we're wrapping up Speaker Talks podcast and the happiness agenda, which is what we want you to know that you can find more happiness. God bless.